So my second job, my first job is to keep their seats warm while they actually present to you. My second job is to moderate some Q&A. We have mic runners. If you could put the question slide up there for my slide deck, guys, if you don't mind. We've got some mic runners in the audience. Before we go to the audience, though, I just had a few questions for the speakers just to sort of warm you up. Hopefully you've got some questions to give you some time to think. Let's go back to trucking. And Ed, you talked about, and you all really touched on the need for funding and how challenging that is, not just in your industry, but I think in the economy in general. Share a little bit on what the trucking industry might be willing to do, or the role you play from a public-private partnership. How are you guys, the trucking industry, willing to participate and help us build infrastructure here in the state of Georgia and beyond?
Sure. You know, in that respect, the trucking industry is probably unique in this panel or in the logistics area generally, because we're the one group that doesn't go asking for money out of the budget. We're actually the suppliers of cash. And we don't want to be just everybody's cash cow. We're very jealously guard our funds, and we want them to go basically to infrastructure that helps our industry. But for instance, our association has developed a plan to increase the fuel tax here in Georgia in order to put more money into the DOT's coffers to help build that freight plan that Todd mentioned, and connectivity around as well. We understand that we have to make the investment to help keep those systems going. Again, the one thing you'll never hear us do is go to the government and say, please give us more money. We just want to work with them, and we realize we'll be the ones funding that infrastructure.
Thank you. You know, along the lines of funding as well, it's in the news a lot and will probably be for a while, but the issue of sequestration, and I think we're all trying to figure out what that still means for everybody. What does it mean for GDOT and maybe more broadly the logistics transportation community?
Well,
yeah.
For sequestration for GDOT, our money goes to federal government is in a highway trust fund, so it's somewhat protected from that to a certain degree, which is good. But the problem is the general fund of the Congress has actually been supplementing the existing highway trust fund. So in other words, the amount of money coming in from diesel tax that Ed was talking about and from gas tax is not enough. So they've taken general fund money and filled our bucket with that money. And that allowed us to have the bill we have today called MAP 21. Well, that bill actually runs out in really less than 2 years now. So we're really very nervous about the upcoming funding beyond federal fiscal year 14 on what we have. Certainly from a perspective of gas tax, we rely on it heavily. But the efficiency of the fleet, whether it's cars, trucks, you name it, and the amount of travel that we are doing in America is not really growing like it used to grow. Our revenue stream is in dire straits.
Yeah. Maybe just talk about the impact, Bob, not from a funding perspective, but the impact that air cargo has on our economy. Besides the Jimmy Choo shoes and our containers full of iPhones, those are obviously critical to many of our kids and wives. But maybe talk a little bit about what the impact of the air cargo has on our economy here in Georgia and the Southeast more broadly.
Yeah, I think, you know, what's been mentioned before, the unique thing about logistics in general is the multiplier effect. And I think air cargo certainly has a similar effect in helping our economy and leveraging the money that we invest to grow. But you know, the high value items, really high value items move by air. So the total percentage that moves by air is very small, but the dollar value is very high. And so it's a very high dollar part of our economy. And so these things are essential in keeping plants running and keeping product on the shelf. But in general, I mean, the economic impact can be felt with companies when they come and consider different regions. You know, they have a checklist of certain regions of the world that they need to connect with to connect their customers or their suppliers to their plants. And the more yeses we have for that, the more likely that companies are going to come here. And so Georgia is fortunate, and Atlanta is fortunate to have great connectivity to 45 countries and a number of global cities that helps us continue to grow and increase the economic investment.
Sure, a system. All the modes play a big role in recruiting new companies and what we do for economic development. Curtis, if I could switch a little bit, you mentioned SHEP a few times, but I'm maybe stealing a question from the crowd here, but maybe just give us a few-minute update on where we are after the 15 years that we've been studying it, and I think that's behind us now. Maybe give us a little bit update on where we are. We heard from the governor and his investment from the state and what they're putting in from the state side. Maybe give us an update on where we are with SHEP.
And this is a rapid fire panel. Paige, are you kidding me?
Yeah. That's a whole presentation in itself, so.
SHEP, or our deepening, for those that don't know, SHEP is the Savannah Harbor Expansion Project, AKA the deepening of the Savannah River. As I mentioned, 5 years in the study. There was a very significant event that occurred on October 26th of this past year. That was technically when the project was approved. It was transmitted to Congress and the President from the Army Corps of Engineers, recommending the scope of the project, recommending the expenditure amount, recommending the timing, the depth, and all of that. So where we're at right now, we're in the first federal budget cycle. As you heard Governor Deal talk about on the state side, well, let me step back. The total price of the project, price tag, $652 million. The state's portion of that is $261, and the state, with what the governor has put in this year's budget, will be at $231 or about. So the balance, this is a federal project, by the way, no different than a federal highway. The balance is the responsibility of the federal government. So we are now in the first federal budget cycle, new budget cycle, since the project's been approved. So we are eagerly anticipating and awaiting the release of the President's budget that I guess will happen the first or second week in April now. And we would hope that there would be, and certainly expect that there would be funding in the project that kind of takes it to the next level. So that's a part of the federal government's process of acknowledging the recommendation and approval of the Army Corps of Engineers. The good thing about where we stand today, and it's not dissimilar from a lot that you see throughout the state of Georgia, when you have the solidarity of support that we have. I mean, Sam Williams from the Atlanta Metro Chamber, the first thing he said when I ran into him earlier was talked about what can I do to further help anything we can do. We're promoting it. When you've got Governor Deal and Mayor Reed, that it seems to be at the top of their agenda on any topic that they have, going to Washington hand in hand, that's the type of bipartisan support we need really across all issues in this country, but to have it for this project that we have and all of our elected officials to sign up for it as they did in Washington this past year, which is kind of a rarity. We're real excited about it. It's something that's long overdue. We're not the only port that needs it, but we're excited about where it stands. It's a big deal on that when the approval was received, or record of decision in October. Timeline. They are acquiring property that's part of the mitigation as we speak. They're finishing the final engineering work. They expect to issue and award actual dredging contracts the second half of this year. And then all that translates into a core timeline that has the deepening work completed second half of 2016. And then keep in mind the Panama Canal should become operational, the new locks, mid-year 2015. So we'll trail that by about a year. Right. That's a quick summary.
I apologize for doing that, like you said, a rapid-fire panel, but I know the audience is probably curious about where we stand on that. We've been hearing about it and know it's important for many years now. So with SHEP just about done, other than a little thing called money, how's the railroads going to react with the volumes that are going to be coming our way, whatever that number might be, both on the trucking side, but specifically, Sharon, talk a little bit about whether the railroads will be ready to handle that volume coming our way.
Sure. Freight railroads are privately owned and they maintain their own rights of way. And I think that's an important distinction that this group needs to understand, that they are privately owned and funded. Having said that, CSX and NS have done an excellent job in supporting the ports and putting in millions of dollars to handle the increase of the cargo that's expected and projected to come in. So they're fully prepared to handle it.
That's good to hear. Well, let's go to the audience. If we've got some questions, we've got mic runners. If you raise your hands, otherwise I got plenty more. So, mic runners, if you just tell me when you got one. Bill Stankiewicz.
Hey, Paige, I want to give you a kudos for another outstanding event. I'm Bill Stankiewicz with HWC Logistics. Anthony Perry wrote a really great book called Transportation Revolutions, and it talks about the future going into 2025. And he had stated electric powered transportation and rail is going to be the common forms of service by 2025. And you can see by the investments that were made by Warren Buffett, George Soros, and also Bill Gates for the Canadian Railway. Where do you folks see the future going in the next 10 to 15 years on transportation and rail within the United States and the Americas?
From a funding perspective, is that what your question is?
From the funding perspective and how the modes may change a little bit with the interchanges.
Sure. So where do we see the industry going in the next 10 years from a funding
Exactly.
perspective? I think we heard a lot about that from some of our speakers as we went through. But any comments on maybe where the funding, we heard about SHEP and where that funding is going to be going forward?
Well,
Any comments?
Maybe more directly, I believe if I understood your question, on the modal shift, which I think was one of the components of your question. From our perspective, through the state of Georgia, we work very closely with GDOT. We work very closely with Norfolk Southern and CSX because, in our opinion, there is going to be a percentage shift from road to rail. I think it's going to happen. Yes, there's going to be growth on the trucking side of the business, but over time we need more of the traffic to shift to a steel wheel type operation on the rail front. Our internal forecasts have us growing today. About 20% of the traffic that moves in and out through our ports moves on or off rail. We see that growing, so as our business grows, we also see the percentage or the slice of the pie that rail is going to participate in needing to grow to somewhere in that 25 to 27% range just to keep the fluidity on the road systems that we need. And that's all part of our long-range planning, improving the velocity of the rail, improving the at-grade crossings that, again, we work with the state and the private sector every year at is a critical part of our long-term success. If we don't do that, the road systems, I don't think physically can keep up with it. So environmental enhancements, better economies of scale, and just the bottlenecks that will be created on the roadways. We've got to work and do everything we can to shift more and more via rail, and we believe that's going to happen.
Yeah. Bob, did you have some comments on the air cargo side?
One thing to add that hasn't been mentioned, I think critically, we can't build our way, as we've heard on the funding side, we can't build our way out of the future constraints that we're going to have in terms of congestion. So modal shift is going to be needed, and we've heard intermodal volumes are projected to go up. But I think, interestingly, the energy resources that have been identified with natural gas are really changing the dynamics right now. And I think we're going to see a shift to more of the tractors being natural gas and other alternative. I know Premier Transportation right here in Atlanta, Forest Park, has 20 natural gas tractors already, and they have orders for another 80. So, I mean, you're seeing this shift in the industry, both on the manufacturing side and on the carrier side towards that fuel.
Thank you. Ed, yeah, please.
Well, if I'm on. I'd just add, I'm familiar with the work. I think one of the things that's left out of that whole equation is the regulatory nature of the issue.
Sure.
If the market's left to itself, you'll get one type of modal shift. If it's regulated, there's an attempt to centrally control everything, you'll get a totally different type of modal shift that'll be much more inefficient. There will be changes. I really don't see any great displacement of trucking, but there'll be changes in how trucking is done. That is, you may see more trucking companies involved in shorter hauls, controlling the freight that's on railroads, but taking more and more of their freight, putting them on railroads for a while, pulling them off railroads and moving them again by truck. Yeah. In fact, our economics have shown that rail intermodal is probably going to be the single fastest growing mode that there is. Well, the other side of rail intermodal is that on the front end or the back end, it gets back on a truck and still gets delivered. So I think the economics all work, but again, the regulatory component of it is sort of the wild card in how that shift occurs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Next question from the audience. We have one up here in the front. Oh, Jack Menzies.
Yes.
It should be.
Am I on? Thank you. I'd like to pick up on Executive Director Foltz's comments about our lack of a national strategy for transportation investment.
Yeah.
And I think that we in this room as practitioners should look at this as a challenge that we need to be raising in our companies, in our associations, in our communities, because we understand the implications of this long-term failure. And if we don't, it's just not going to happen. And this is a slow emerging disaster, as it were, for us internationally, and we really need to do more about it individually.
Was there a question there, or just a comment?
The question really would be, the point was addressed here, but too often we go to meetings and we don't do anything with it. And I get the opportunity to go to a lot of meetings a year, and we talk a lot about it, but we're not doing enough about it. Yeah, and we really need to engage, and perhaps the other panelists have suggestions as to how we might better engage. But we're the owners of this problem. We understand it better, and it falls too low on the list of corporate priorities and association priorities in terms of tackling it.
It is certainly a system, and we definitely need a freight transportation strategy nationally. Part of the role that I play on that National Supply Chain Competitiveness Committee is, and we're discussing just that. What does that plan need to look like, and what are the performance measurements that would be a part of that? Not just at the Department of Commerce side, but also in the Department of Transportation side, which is a complementary committee as well. And any comments from the panel on the need for a national strategy, other than, yes, we need one?
Paige, all I would say is I echo everything that you've just brought up. Folks, if you don't spend a lot of time in Washington and you talk about national strategies, if everybody in this room, along with many in the country, got excited about it today and started pounding the pavement to try to make it happen, we might be fortunate enough to have a strategy in place at the national level in a decade. So the clock is ticking, and we need to get on board with it as much as we can. And Paige, you're a strong voice in the state on this committee.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, right here. Peggy John.
Thank you. Based on what Curtis and Ed have said, Todd, do you think there is a reason to add more intermodal inland intermodal sites other than Cordele into the overall state strategy?
That was to Todd, or do you want to?
Well, DOT, anybody, whoever.
I'll just say that what I'm knowledgeable about. Cordele has done a lot to try to get ready, but there are several other communities around Georgia that are also seeing what they're doing in Cordele, and it's got a lot of upside and potential. They haven't realized it yet, but I think over time it's just going to take a lot of energy and a lot of knowledge to get people to come to these inland ports. But as far as transportation to and from those ports, we're ready. We've got a pretty good network. Like I think the governor said, we've still got, we talk about how we need more money. Yes, we do definitely need more money to update the facilities we have, but we still have a great system. We have one of the best systems in the country. And people we lose track of that a little bit as we kind of bemoan the fact that we need more money and we need this and that. But we still have a great network of interstates. We have a great network of 4-lane divided highways around Georgia. We can get product to and from on our highway network fairly easily. We just need to finish it off.
That's great. Curtis, maybe, a lot of the stuff comes through the port and moves to a lot of other places. Maybe your thoughts on that same topic.
Peggy, you must have been in some of our meetings recently, strategic meetings. I think from our perspective, the short answer is yes. I think there's some very, very specific niche opportunities, kind of like Cordele, and we're looking at them closely. It's not time for prime time yet, but I've got one of our board members, Mr. Tarbutton, that's in here right now, and he might be hearing about this in the next couple of board meetings. But yes. Yeah, I think there are opportunities. Every piece of our transportation network can be improved upon. All it does is, to me, it builds the foundation stronger every time we do it. And then that translates into economic development opportunities for us as a state and for us as a state to take a leadership position.
It's definitely an exciting time for a lot of things going on here in our state, as you've heard from all of our speakers. We have time for probably one more quick question. In the back?
Good morning.
It's on.
It's on. Good morning. Chris Deesas from
Morning,
Savannah.
Chris.
I run Gennaro Technomar. I would just like to follow up and let people know you need to support this harbor deepening for two reasons. It's not just the depth of the river. We're having problems, as Curtis mentioned, to keep the river maintained at the project depth. So there's no point going deep when we can't do what we're supposed to do right now. So funds are needed. So thanks for that, Curtis, just backing you up. This question is for DOT and the railroads. What are you planning to do about eliminating railroad crossings in and around the ports? That's a frequent accident site and a major congestion problem.
Yeah.
At-grade railroad crossings.
Yeah, you know, it's quite interesting. When we were developing the list for the transportation sales tax last summer, what popped up in just about every community was a railroad grade crossing upgrade or grade separation. And probably had, I'd say 20 or so statewide that were identified on that list because that sells to the public. They see the risk, the safety. We do have limited amount of funds in the transportation bill for hazard elimination. It's just not near enough to do it. We've made a lot of progress though. If you go back 20 years ago and look at the amount of crossings we had that were unprotected, unguarded, and now we go back and look at what we've got now. We've done a tremendous job in improving that area, but we haven't done a lot of grade separations. In other words, total elimination of the hazard. And we need more of those, and we've got several planned. The biggest one we got going on right now is in Valdosta, where they've got literally 50 to 100 trains a day, and we're grade separating that US 84, which is a major freight route in South Georgia, currently underway.
Sharon? It's on.
Safety is the #1 priority for the freight rail industry, so at any time that you can have a grade separation, that's ideal. The railroads work closely with DOT on the engineering of the crossing, but once the crossing is up, it's the railroad's responsibility to maintain it, and we just have to continue to work with DOT and make the motoring public as safe as possible.
And that's not just idle talk. I can tell you from being to many CSX and Norfolk Southern meetings, every meeting starts off with a safety briefing, who knows CPR, where the fire exits are, so it is ingrained deeply into their culture. I know that's true for all the short lines and railroads as well, so safety is definitely a high priority and talked about all the time from a railroad perspective. Well, I hate to do this because I got more questions too, but we are out of time. We need to move on to our next session. First of all, let's give a round of applause to our panelist speakers. Thank you. Got the stage. Got that stage. That way. Oh, you can come this way. That's fine. You need to get your microphone. Sorry. All right, so if you could put my slides back up there. Thanks, guys. So we now move into our next session, which is our breakout sessions. They're located downstairs, and I just wanted to take a moment and recognize some of our sponsors. Our coffee break sponsor, we have plenty of coffee out there, Benton Global. If you haven't been down there, room 206, which is down to the left a little bit, we have a business and Wi-Fi center. Free Wi-Fi throughout the facility to get on the internet if you'd like. Coastal Logistics Group graciously sponsored our business center. There's a laptop down there and a place to hang out and have a private meeting if you need it. Please come visit our business center. And then our opportunity sessions is sponsored by Schneider Logistics. We have 3 opportunity sessions for you this afternoon. They are located basically right below us. If you see, we have 3 sessions focused on, really some of the big freight movers, if you will, for the state of Georgia, and that's true for other parts of the nation as well. Broad titled, food, retail, and manufacturing, and what you'll see there is a wide spectrum of different companies that make up those industries. We've got some great speakers lined up for you. Food is located in room 208 to 210. Retail is in 202 to 204, which is the same room we were in yesterday, just for reference, and manufacturing in 211 to 213. Those sessions will start at 10:15, so thank you for everybody. We're right back on time. Those sessions will start at 10:15. Please visit the sponsors outside. Take everything with you. They're going to work some magic and reset this room for lunch. Our lunch will start back in here at noon. We have the CFO of Carter's to talk about multi-channel commerce and a great panel of experts for you immediately following. Thank you very much. We'll see you right back here at noon. Thank you.